Wow. Invest in good cases.
But the true revelation came when they opened the chest. Inside were layers of Atz's early life, preserved and untouched for decades. There were carvings from his teenage years, little wooden figures, rough around the edges yet surprisingly expressive. There were letters he had written but never mailed, drawings he made during moments of isolation, and music sheets covered in his handwriting early, attempts at the songs that would later help him heal and express the emotions he couldn't voice aloud. The journals told an even, deeper story. They captured moments from Atz's youth, times when the pressure of building a future on the frontier weighed heavily on him. Some pages expressed fear, responsibility, conflict, and raw vulnerability. Others revealed his complicated relationship with his father, a man who demanded excellence, toughness, and total commitment to the land. While the world saw a strong, confident patriarch, the journals showed the silent battles Atz fought within himself as he tried to meet those expectations. One entry talked about a brutal winter, when the family barely scraped by, a time when resources ran thin and every mistake could cost them everything. Another page described the constant struggle between wanting to explore the world and wanting to live up to his father's standards. It wasn't written for an audience. It wasn't meant for television. It was meant for mental survival. Reading those entries, the family began to understand the origins of some of Atz's harshness when he was younger. The same harshness that he later acknowledged publicly and worked hard to repair. The journals weren't excuses. They were explanations, pieces of a puzzle that finally made sense. The discovery brought a wave of emotions across the family. This wasn't a barn filled with secrets to fuel gossip. It was filled with the legacy of survival, the unfiltered truth of a man who carried more weight than most people ever realized. A man who had grown up under the relentless demands of frontier living, where mistakes meant hunger, storms meant fear, and every day required strength. Whether or not he felt strong, there were moments in the journals that surprised even his. Children's stories of sacrifices he made quietly, hardships he endured without telling anyone, choices he regretted but never had the courage to talk about. He wrote about nights he stayed awake listening to the wind, wondering if he was good enough to protect the homestead. He wrote about fear not of nature, but of failing the people he loved. These weren't the kinds of things he shared openly, but they were the kinds of things he kept hidden, in a barn that became a silent witness to his emotional evolution. The tools found there told another story of a father, teaching himself skills that he would later pass on to his children. Some of the weapons, traps, and equipment dated back to his early adulthood, when he had no choice but to become both protector and provider. There were signs of long, desperate winters, years when the homestead was completely isolated, times when the family had to rely entirely on what they could hunt, fix, repair, or create by hand. Finding those items allowed the younger Kilchers to see the hardships their father never voiced. It painted a picture that was bigger than Atz the musician or Atz the reality TV star. It showed Atz the survivor. The journals and artifacts also revealed something unexpected: moments of gentleness, creativity, and deep introspection. Drawings of the homestead in summer, notes about dreams he had for his future children, ideas for songs he hoped to record someday, plans he never followed through on, apologies he wrote but never delivered. Together, all of it created a portrait of a man who was both strong and fragile, fierce but soft-hearted, flawed but always trying to do better. In the end, the unthinkable discovery inside the barn wasn't shocking because it was dark or scandalous. It was unthinkable because of how vulnerable it made Atz seem. For decades, he carried the weight of his past alone, hiding pieces of himself in a place no one else went. The barn became more than a structure. It became a storage place for memories, regrets, dreams, and moments he didn't know how to express. And when the family finally opened it, they weren't just stepping into a building. They were stepping into the soul of the man who helped shape the entire homestead. What they found didn't expose him, it explained him. It showed the roots of the resilience that defines the Kilcher legacy. It revealed the battles he fought long before the cameras ever rolled, the pressure he faced long before the world knew his name, and the quiet strength he built over a lifetime. The barn, once a symbol of mystery, became a symbol of understanding. And the legacy it revealed will stay with the family and with fans long after the structure itself fades into history. There's a certain mystique surrounding the Kilcher homestead, an energy that comes from generations of survival, tradition, and secrets built into the land. Over the years, Alaska, the last frontier, has shown viewers the rugged beauty of the place. Snowpack trails, silent forests, and cabins older than the stars that hang above them. But even with everything we've seen, nothing prepared fans or even the Kilcher family themselves for what they discovered inside Atz Kilcher's old barn. What they found wasn't just surprising. It changed the way everyone understood Atz and the life he lived long before cameras ever rolled. Atz has always stood out as one of the most fascinating, unpredictable figures on the homestead. He's a man who sings about pain and healing in the same breath, someone who can switch from soft-spoken wisdom to memories of harsh lessons he learned as a young man. Viewers know he's complicated. They know he's lived through darker chapters he doesn't shy away from talking about. But even with all that, nobody truly understood just how much of his past he had quietly carried with him, buried deep in a place almost no one had seen from the inside. The barn had always been part of the landscape, tucked away behind a line of trees, alone and silent through the changing seasons. Its roof sagged in places, its boards weathered by decades of storms and Alaskan winters that shown no mercy. Even longtime locals couldn't say exactly what Atz used it for. Some believed it was storage. Others thought Kilcher had started building it as a workshop back in the early days of the homestead. The truth was simple. The barn was private, off-limits, and no one, not even most of the Kilcher kids, really questioned why. What they didn't know was that the barn wasn't just old. It was a vault of history, one that would only open when nature itself forced the family's hand. After a brutal winter, one of the worst in recent memory, the barn's foundation shifted. Heavy snow pressed against the walls, frost dug deep into the wood, and winds tore at the roof until the structure leaned dangerously. It became clear that if they didn't intervene soon, the next storm could bring everything crashing down. So the family did what they always do. They worked together, stepping into the barn with the intention of protecting the land and their history. But the moment they walked inside, it became clear that something was off. Dust hung in the air like a fog, and tools lay scattered in ways that didn't look random. Old harnesses, rusted saws, forgotten ropes, and crates stacked in a formation that didn't seem accidental at all. It looked less like storage and more like someone had been trying to hide something behind the clutter. In the farthest corner, half obscured behind a mountain of wood and decades of old supplies, stood a small sectioned-off wall. Handmade, uneven, and strangely out of place. It didn't look like part of the original barn. It looked like someone had added it later. For reasons no one could guess, when they finally removed the makeshift divider, the temperature seemed to drop. A sealed room, almost like a vault, sat untouched behind it. What they found inside stopped them cold. Sitting in the center was a large metal chest, its surface rusted, its lock stiff with age. The chest alone was enough to raise questions, but it was what surrounded it that turned a simple storage building into something much more emotional than any of them expected. There were notebooks, dozens of them, each wrapped carefully in cloth, protected from moisture, hidden away like something too personal to ever leave in the open. There were tools unlike any on the current homestead, long forgotten blades, handmade traps, intricate pieces of equipment that belonged to Yule. Relics from a time when survival demanded different skills and far harsher choices. Some were ceremonial. Some were practical. Some had clearly been used and used hard.